just say what everybody here knows. Mike Pence will never be president. Nice guy, not a leader.
Marc?
Well, I don't know if Mike Pence will run for president in 2024, but I don't think Matt Gaetz will have an impact on that. In fact, I'd be surprised if he was still voting. It's more likely he'll be in prison for child sex trafficking by 2024. And I'm actually surprised that Florida law enforcement still allows him to speak to teenage conferences like that. So I'm not too worried about Matt Gaetz thinks.
Damn, I think what Matt Gaetz thinks is, why am I on fire suddenly? But anyway, yeah, no, that was Marc Short, former chief of staff for Pence, absolutely destroying Matt Gaetz there. And there's some issues for Matt Gaetz in that video. One, being like the bold guy who predicts that Pence won't be president. Oh, very, very bold prediction there, buddy. I think everyone, including Mother, knows that Pence is not gonna be president. But second of all, yeah, he is still under investigation for the human trafficking. And it's one thing for Marc Short to imply that he should be worried about that. There's also some evidence that maybe Matt Gaetz is still worried about it, because we just learned that he was one of 20 Republicans who voted no to reauthorizing an anti-human trafficking law on Wednesday. Perhaps trying to preemptively save your butt, buddy, that you're against this. So the law was the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Reauthorization Act. It still passed 401 to 20. So voting against it and making it fail is one thing. That looks terrible. But voting against it, knowing it's gonna pass anyway, just to make sure we know that you do not want these protections for victims of human trafficking, that you don't want more investigations of it, that's like needlessly transparent about your own history and what you're worried about. By the way, it's been around for 22 years. It's been reauthorized tons of times, no trouble. It's just a routine thing that happens. And yet in this particular case, they had a problem with it. Now, not only Matt Gaetz, who has his own particular reason to be worried about it, which we'll get into, but also Marjorie Greene, Lauren Boebert, Mo Brooks, Ken Buck, Andy Biggs, Louis Gohmert, Gosar as well. All of those people. We'll get into why that whole group might be against this. But the act is simple. It combats human trafficking, particularly sex trafficking, through severe penalties for perpetrators and support services for victims. Nobody could be against that unless they think that they're one of the people who's gonna be having severe penalties levied against them. And Gaetz has been under federal investigation for 2 years over the question of whether he had sex with a minor, whether he paid for it across state lines. That would, of course, be sex trafficking. Now, he has, of course, not been charged with anything, and he swears that he didn't do it. But note that this isn't the first time that he's taken this position. Back in 2017, he cast the only no vote on another anti-trafficking law. I believe that one was a Florida state law, but he was the only person against it. I think the Gaetz doth protest too much. JR, what do you think?
When is he gonna be asked about this constantly? And when is it every time that he puts his face in front of the camera, someone should ask him, hey, so you voted against this child sex trafficking bill, why? He'll have an answer. It won't make any sense, but he'll have an answer. And whatever he says, you'll easily be able to follow up and ask, so why is it you always accuse members of the LGBTQ+ community of being perverse child sexual predators that traffic them? Why is it you always say things like that, considering these accusations against you? Or why is it that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Mo Brooks, Ken Buck, all these idiots who voted the same way Matt Gaetz did are always talking about how these libs and these gay folks are always going after your children, but they're standing next to Matt Gaetz. And after, if it does get to that point and Marc Short's predictions are correct, and he does end up getting arrested, indicted, even potentially jailed, are they gonna be having to hear from people from now on asking, why were you standing next to a child sex trafficking culprit? And why is it that you thought he was on the up and up? I thought you had a good radar for these horrific people in our society. Maybe we should listen to that BS that you spew anymore. There should be a normal thought process that regular people go down after you see criminals, which we've seen over and over and over again, become these are exposed as the criminals that they are on the very things that they're telling you to divert your eyes towards someone else to pay attention to. I don't understand how this normal thought process of seeing the actual bad guys be exposed and you still don't understand it. The reasons why they've convinced you is because they're doing it. It's just the oddest thing. Somehow people still go to Catholic churches and go, yeah, that whole priest cover-up thing wasn't that big of a deal. I don't know how this happened.
Ridiculous. Yeah, that little cable of Green and Boebert and Gaetz and all of that, like they would have you believe that there is a portion of our government that wants to traffic kids for sex.
We do have.
If that's so, which side of the vote do you think would be a part of that cable? The ones who tried to add higher penalties for it, or the ones who took a last stand? The hill they're dying on is not protecting people from trafficking. Makes you wonder.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.